They say no one ever really leaves the airwaves. Some voices are just waiting to be heard again. My name is Eli Grant, 29, and until recently, I ran a small horror podcast out of my apartment in Chicago. I wasn't famous, but I had a loyal listener base, people who loved creepy stories, urban legends, and unexplained mysteries. But the city grind got to me. Burned out and looking for a change, I moved back to my sleepy hometown. Ash Pine's a place so quiet it could be a ghost itself. That's when I found it. WZNT 103, the town's old radio station, long abandoned and barely standing on the edge of town. It was like a forgotten relic. No one talked about it. Not anymore. I was curious, so I started asking around. But every time I brought it up, people would clam up, get this weird look in their eyes, or just walk away. It was like mentioning a family tragedy. Finally, the old librarian, Mrs. Gable, leaned over her desk and whispered that place died on air. Don't go waking the dead, of course. That just made me want to know more. So I dug into the town archives. WZNT went dark suddenly one night in 1998. It used to host a popular midnight talk show called Midnight Frequency, hosted by a man named Vincent Black. One night, during a live broadcast, listeners heard Vincent scream, and then silence. The signal just cut. They never found him. The official story was a technical failure. But the local legend tells a different tale. It says if you tune your radio to 103.1 FM at exactly 12:44 a.m., you'll hear a voice whispering from the static. Don't listen too long, people say, or he hears you back. As a horror podcaster, how could I resist? I had to find out for myself. The station was a complete wreck. It looked like it had been hit by a storm and then forgotten for decades. Cobwebs hung like funeral shrouds over everything. The equipment was smashed, and the walls were cracked. But the weirdest part, the power was still on. That should have been my first massive red flag. The main studio smelled like rust and decaying paper, a smell that sticks to the back of your throat. And then I saw the clocks. Every single clock on the wall was frozen at the exact same time, 12:44. I glanced at my digital watch and my blood ran cold. It was blinking the same numbers, 12:44. That was impossible. It had been 3 p.m. when I walked in. As I explored the dusty control room, I stumbled upon a metal box tucked away under a console. Inside were dozens of old reel-to-reel tapes, each with a handwritten label. The titles were Unsettling, Don't Listen, The Man Who Waits, Echoes Live. My eyes landed on one in particular. Test transmission for A. My curiosity got the better of me. My hands were almost shaking as I threaded the dusty tape onto the old player, took a deep breath, and hit play. First, there was just static, a hiss that filled the dead air of the studio. Then, a voice crackled through the speakers. A low, raspy whisper. You shouldn't have come here, Eli. I froze, my heart pounding against my ribs. It knew my name. No one knew I was here. No one except the voice on the tape. I knew this was bigger than just some local ghost story. This was real. I started documenting everything, turning my old podcast into a live investigation of WZNT. My listeners went wild. They thought it was some brilliant, immersive alternate reality game. They praised my storytelling, my sound design. I didn't have the heart to tell them it wasn't a game. The recordings were real. The whispers were real. And the more I played those tapes, the more I broadcasted from that forgotten station. The stranger things got. Shadows moved in my peripheral vision. Doors in my house would creak open on their own. I started hearing whispers even when the tapes weren't playing. I was becoming part of the story. I had a terrifying feeling that this broadcast was reaching listeners. I never intended listeners in the dark. The messages started trickling in after the third episode. Listeners, dedicated night owls who tuned into my podcast, Midnight Frequency, told me they were hearing things, static, crackling through their phones at odd hours, sometimes even when the devices were completely turned off. One fan, a college student named Sarah, swore she heard someone breathing through her headphones during a part of the episode that was meant to be completely silent. She said it sounded wet, ragged, like a last gasp. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to audio glitches or just overactive imaginations, but the messages kept coming, and they got stranger. Another listener, a woman from a small town in Oregon, sent me a frantic email. She claimed that after listening to the show, she saw a figure standing across the street from her house, just beyond the reach of her porch light. He was holding an old, battered transistor radio. He had no eyes, she wrote, the words practically leaping off the screen. Just a mouth that didn't move, but I could hear it speaking. She said it was whispering numbers, the same frequency I mentioned in the show, 103.1 FM. That's when the real fear started to set in. The stories were no longer just stories, they were bleeding into reality. I stopped sleeping. Every creak of my apartment building, every distant siren became part of the broadcast. Shadows in the corner of my eye seemed to stretch and twist into unnatural shapes. When I looked in the mirror, I'd catch a fleeting glimpse of something else looking back, something tall, thin, and wrong. But I couldn't stop. The story of Vincent Black and the original Midnight Frequency had its hooks in me. I had to know how it ended. The story wasn't finished, and neither was I. The final reel was at the very bottom of the box, buried under decades of forgotten paperwork. It was unmarked. No label, no date, just a thick layer of dust and the faint, musty smell of age. My hands were shaking as I threaded the tape into the old reel-to-reel player. I took a deep breath, flipped the switch, and hit play. For a few agonizing seconds, there was nothing but the soft hiss of empty tape. Then a voice cut through the silence. "This is Vincent Black." It was him. But the confident, smooth broadcaster's voice was gone. He sounded terrified, his words choked and rushed. "If you're hearing this, the broadcast never stopped. It never will." There was a sound of fumbling, a microphone being dropped. "He's not a story. He's real. He lives in the signal now. He's looking for a new voice, a new host." Then came a scream. It was long and distant, echoing as if from the bottom of a well, and it chilled me to my very bones. But underneath it, that's when I heard it. My own voice, saying things I had never recorded in a twisted, mocking tone I had never used. "Welcome back to Midnight Frequency," it crooned. "I'll be your host forever." I slammed the power button, but the machine didn't stop. The reels kept spinning. The voice kept talking. That night, I tried to run. I scrambled for the station door, but it was locked solid. My phone was dead. The screen a black mirror. Flashlight flickered once, twice, and then died, plunging me into near total darkness. And then, one by one, the old clocks on the wall started ticking again, but backward. The vintage radio equipment, silent for 50 years, flickered to life. Dials spun on their own. Switches flipped with audible clicks, and the on-air sign above the booth door glowed a sickening blood red. And then I saw him. It was Vincent, or what was left of him. Tall, gaunt, dressed in tattered 1970s clothes. His face was a pale mask with two dark, empty sockets where his eyes should have been. And his mouth, it was just a thin, unmoving line. Just like the listener described, he stood behind the glass of the recording booth, just staring. Then his voice whispered directly into my mind, a cold intrusion in my thoughts. But as he spoke, my own mouth began to move. I was repeating his words, my own voice a hollow echo of his. I was the new host. I don't remember leaving the station. I don't remember how I got home. Maybe I never did. My podcast, Midnight Frequency, keeps uploading new episodes every week right on schedule. I haven't recorded a single word since that night. My friends call me confused. They say they can still hear my show on the radio, broadcast on 103.1 FM. Even though that station has been without power for decades, it always plays at the same time, exactly 12:44 a.m. The new episodes always start the same way. Welcome back, Night Dwellers. You're listening to Midnight Frequency. Tonight's topic, the ones who never stopped broadcasting. If you're hearing this, if you've tuned in, then I'm sorry, it's already too late. Because once you hear the signal, he hears you back. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and whatever you do, don't check the static.